is an amalgam of many people at that period in Miles' life that were trying to get in to either write the obituary or the comeback. They didn't know which one it would be. Frances obviously is absolutely real, and that whole B story is real.
And a great actress.
Yeah, Miyatsu Coronel. Yeah.
Cast beautifully.
Yeah.
Having done this now, and we'll come to your directing in a second, but I'm just talking about the acting piece. Having done this now, is Miles Davis more complicated or more simplified for you now as a person?
That's a good question. And I don't know that it's binary.
Okay.
I think sometimes it's both.
Okay.
You know, I look at the consistency of his journey. It is always someone who is searching for the next thing and trying to hear the next sound. And, you know, right before he passed, he was making music with Prince.
Yeah.
So he was never finished, and he never wanted to go back. He always wanted to figure out what the next thing was. And that's something, when you look at his life and his work throughout his life, is totally consistent. But he was a complex figure, and he was someone who always put the music before anything. So when you're in a relationship with a person like that, be it as a friend, a lover, a wife, a husband, a coworker, whatever, you are often that which is left in the wake to greater or lesser degree. But I also think that you understand that that's the contract, you know, and the people in Miles' life were the beneficiaries often of his creative genius and what he was able to produce, but also sometimes got their wings, you know, burned when they fly that close to the sun.
I wondered whether or not it was his confidence that led to his curiosity, or his curiosity that built and fueled his confidence. And what I'm getting at here is, I mean, he knew he was good. I mean, obviously there's some confidence here. And yet he was such a curious person, as you said earlier. He would try so many different things, not always knowing whether those things were going to work or not.
Yeah.
What's the relationship between his confidence and his curiosity?
Well, I think that the confidence, what belies that sort of facade to me, the cool, and you know, you hear things like Miles used to think, is it cooler to tap my whole foot to keep time, or just tap my foot inside my shoe? That doesn't sound like the most confident person in the world in that way. That's like, oh, that's something that reveals a vulnerability to me, that you're thinking about how you're perceived. It looks like Miles could care less and just did whatever he wanted to do, and if you got whatever. But there's someone who's very thoughtful there, and a lot of people that knew Miles very well said that he was incredibly sensitive. And when you listen to the music, of course he was. Yeah. You know, that you can't, a monster is not producing those, that beautiful music. And a lot of what he put on was to protect this, you know, softer part of him, this part from which he created, which is, you know, can be fragile. And people were at him a lot. And this sort of like tough guy image, this stay at arm's length image, a lot of times was protection. A lot of times it was other things too. But that was a part of it that was interesting to understand the vulnerabilities that this super cool dude had.
I was about to say, and this is my take on it, others will have their own opinion when they see it, but I think they'll agree with me on this, that you did a really, really good job, particularly for a directorial debut, a really good job of finding and balancing that confidence and that vulnerability. There were scenes in here where, I mean, I took away a number of lessons about his vulnerability, but how he managed them as well. There's some scenes in there that really, I'm like, Miles did have some vulnerabilities. Because to your point, he seems on stage like the most confident. Any cat that can get on stage and turn his back to you and play, it's a cat who's got some confidence, man.
And then, you know, whether it's true or not, you know, I understand it. Miles would say, you know, does a conductor face the audience when they conduct? I'm dealing with my band. We're trying to work on stuff and find things, and he would walk around the stage to see acoustically what pockets sounded better where he was playing. And some of it was attitude. But the thing that I liked about Miles and about the way he worked is that it was all about process. It was all about process, you know. He didn't introduce songs because he's like, I'm not going to get up and do the sort of entertainment thing. I'm actually doing something that's a lot more ingratiating to you in a way, which is going, come look at how we work on stuff. Come see the journey, because that's really what they were about. You know, Herbie said Miles paid them to practice in front of people. You know, not come down and do your polished, perfect work, but to let's all be out here and try to figure some stuff out together.
Speaking of Herbie, how cool was it? I'll fast forward to the end of the film. When you're on stage with Herbie and Wayne Shorter and Esperanza Spalding, and you're playing with them.
And Gary Clark Jr. And Antonio Sanchez and Rob Glasper. No, I was
How cool is that?
The whole, you know, that was enough of an excuse to do the movie right there. I mean, I had no idea that we were able to be able to do that. But yeah, I was someone who, you know, came up sort of, you know, surrounded with musicians and in that sweet spot of that creativity and that creation. It was great to be there with these masters who just do it all the time.
Speaking of masters, Carlos Santana was sitting in that chair just a few weeks ago as a guest on this program. Always pleased to have him. And I've gotten so much mail from people, you know, literally snail mail, email, from folks who saw that conversation. Because Carlos, at one point, seemed to suggest that he was enhanced by the drugs that he took, as opposed to suffering artistically from being drugged up. I raise that because in the movie you don't shy away from Miles' cocaine use. You know, Miles isn't here to answer this, but what's your sense of whether or not that aided and abetted him artistically, or whether it got in the way of what could have been even a greater iconic repertoire?
Well, I think often it's not but, it's and, you know? And again, if we were going to parse it, I mean, we had him on the couch, maybe, and a therapist was here. They could talk him through it, and we could find the moments where, like, now that's probably the coke didn't help you there. You know, imagine the heroin at that point wasn't really additive. But we also do know that drugs do open up different centers, and they do make different connections that you would make when you were not high. It is a slippery slope, and one is not necessarily benefiting the other. I know that it was really bad for Charlie Parker because it didn't stop his playing. It didn't have a negative effect until everything caught up. But he could get high and play unbelievably to the rafters and things that no one could imagine they could ever hear coming out of a sax. And that, in many ways, led to his undoing. That if he had lost all of his facility, I don't know, he was hooked. Maybe he would have been able to be more in a position to quit, but probably not. I mean, we've seen many, many greats. This isn't a new story, unfortunately. The presence of drugs with this kind of genius that seems to be boundless.
The relationship that we see in the film, the acidic relationship that we see in the film that Miles had with the record company at that time, was that typical of the way he tended to get along or not get along with record executives?
Well, you know, again, some of that is dramatized. I think specifically his relationship with George Butler ultimately was very good. You know, George sent him a piano. George was at him to come back, but not in a way that was necessarily combative. And I don't think we portray him that way in the film, but he was saying, hey, man, we'd come back. You know, we'd love to hear your voice again and get you back in the studio and get you working. And he did, during this period of time, record this session that was never released, and, you know, people haven't heard. I've heard it. I think you can find it online if you dig around. But he was often, you know, there's famous notes that he sent, you know, to the studio, just with like a number and a date.
Exactly.
Send it. Where's it at? Let's go. You know.
Let me shift from the acting now to the directing. So, is it cool for you to hear that term, directorial debut?
Sure. When you say it, it rolls off really nice.
No. So what's your takeaway from this maiden voyage?
Oh man, it was a a tricky way to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
and a tricky subject. That's why I got high five you on that. As a matter of fact,
appreciate it.
I was like, if I were making my directorial debut, this is not the subject that I would have chosen.
Well,
that's a real.
I didn't set out to do that. That really was not the goal. I was not saying, well, let me find the hardest thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I would have found something easier.
The hardest way to do it. No, that wasn't. I wasn't. And when this all came to pass, it was because Vincent Wilburn. He saw me in Devil in a Blue Dress, and he's like, "Oh, if we ever do a movie,
love
it's
Vince,
gonna be Miles." Yeah, he's great.
Hey, Vince.
Yeah, what's up, Vince?
What's up, Vince?
And it had been sort of swirling around, but he kind of made a declaration when Miles was being inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2006 that they were going to do a movie and I was going to star as it. So I was like, oh, okay. So I met with the family and I just pitched them this idea about how I kind of thought we should approach his life and the material and what the movie should feel like. And it was a departure from the things that had been pitched to them before. So they were kind of excited about it. And I said, okay, well, if somebody writes that, then, let me know and I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
But it became apparent pretty quickly that if that was how it was going to be done, it was probably going to take me to do it. And it's something that I tried to give away a few years ago. I tried to find another director for the part so that I could just focus on the acting, and I didn't want that responsibility. But everybody that I pitched it to were both doing their own thing and were also saying, but this is your movie. This is your vision. This is your whole thing. So why wouldn't you do it? Yeah. I was like, because I don't want to die. I was like, I don't want to be hospitalized at the end of it. But ultimately, it fell to me to do it because that's the only way it was going to get done.
I thought that the estate, the family, was very generous in the story that they allowed you to tell, because I think you intimated this earlier in this conversation, that some of that stuff, I mean, we see these stories that get sanitized and sterilized and deodorized.
All of it.
And then it flops because everybody know it ain't real.
Exactly.
But I thought
you got to do the PG version of it, and it's like, really? James Brown PG? But whatever.
Yeah.
It was, if it had not been Miles, and I think if they did not understand really what his quest had been in his entire life, it would have been much more difficult. Had they not been themselves artists and understand creativity, they would not necessarily have been down for something that was more in line with what he would have done, they believed, than something that he would have wanted to see done about him. And he has famously kind of gone in on movies that were about historical figures, musicians that felt like sort of cookie cutter things that he'd seen before. He was like, I don't want that. So whenever we would discuss the film and how we wanted to go about it, because I wanted them on board the whole way and was totally deferential to what they wanted out there. I said, do you think that he would want something like what we have seen before in these kinds of movies that feel like cliff notes of the person's life, or do you think he'd want something that's wild and gangster and feels like it's chasing itself down a hole and then comes out of the other and just feels like it's got some drive in it? And they'd be like, nah, do that. And Miles wasn't shy about his behavior ever. He wasn't trying to hide his drug use, his relationship with women, and he was like, yeah, I did all that stuff. And he very much regrets his relationship with Frances and how that all came to pass. And they were friends afterwards. So it's a very complicated relationship in that regard. And he has been on record being really open with all of it.
Yeah. So now that you have survived, you didn't die, it didn't kill you.
Right.
They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
I don't think that's been proven medically. I think what they say is that stress actually kills you.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what we've learned?
Yeah. So I guess the question is, did you enjoy it enough to want to do it again?
Not like that.
Okay.
I don't think.
But you do want to direct again, though.
Yeah, okay. I would direct again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was too many things to freight it with.
Yeah.
But I felt like I went to school and got my compro directorate.
Yeah.
Compro directorate.
I got you.
That's what I got on that movie.
And I thought you were going to say, I'll direct again, but I don't want nothing to do with that Cheeto guy again, man.
Yeah,
I don't want to direct that Cheeto guy again.
Yeah, he was a drag.
Yeah. All right, what can you tell me? I got a minute to go, and I can't end this without asking about my man, Marty Kahn. April 10.
We'll be back.
You're back on the Showtime.
That's right.
What you shot in Cuba?
Yes, we did.
How cool was that?
It was very interesting. I mean, have you been?
Oh yeah, a couple times.
So you know that country needs something,
Yeah.
and that you go over there potentially with this exoticism of like, oh, the people and the music, and it's gonna be, and then you get over there and it's like there is that, but there's also like there's a lot of depression here, and there's a lot of sadness and poverty, and we hope that there will be some sort of an exchange, not just culturally, but there will be an ability to have the trickle down, which when does that ever work? But I hope it will.
Yeah.
When this infusion of capitalism happens, that the people can get uplifted. When the guy in the hotel who's bringing you your towels is a surgeon, and he's got to work in the hotel to make chips, and your waitress is a physicist, and you're like, this is what you do? You're like, yeah, the training school of 20 years.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. They need something.
Yep. From your mouth to God's ears.
There we go.
Yeah. Miles Ahead is the film that Don Cheadle stars in and directs this weekend. I highly recommend it if that means anything to you. I enjoyed it. And Marty Kahn is back on House of Lies on Showtime on April the 10th. And Mr. Cheadle, you're welcome here anytime you want, sir.
I'll be back.
Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you.